change your heart, change your life, change the planet.
A lot of people use food as kind of a numbing agent.
Well, it's not something that we do consciously. It's hardwired into the brain. We have what they call reward circuitry in the brain. And first, before we go into the reward circuitry, it's important to understand that the brain is not one organ. We talk about it as if it's one organ. I have a heart, I have a liver, I have a brain. But the brain is actually many, many different organs all clumped into one skull. So you've got the two hemispheres, right and left. And when we look at a brain, we see all the squiggly fat lines. Yep. That outer layer with all those squiggly lines in it, that's called the cortex. That's the outermost layer. It is the most advanced layer. And that's only one part. You could consider that one organ. Underneath that, we have a more primitive brain, often referred to as the limbic system. We share this with all mammals. And then underneath that, we have the reptilian brain, which we share with pretty much all creatures that walk the land. And that's a different organ, again. And then we have a brain stem, which is incredibly primitive, which we share with any vertebrate animal, anywhere, any creature that has a vertebrae. So you've got these 4 different organs in the head, all with different desires, all with different goals, and all with different ways of achieving those goals. And they're all competing. It's not as if there is a unified intention inside your head. The advanced cortex has very different goals than the primitive brainstem. So it's really a matter of who wins the fight. That's what your behavior is going to be.
Sure.
So, for instance, anybody who has a cat, you can be petting your cat, and the cat will be purring and smiling at you, and at the same time its tail is wagging back and forth. Yeah. Which in a cat is not a good thing. That's a bad thing. In a dog, wagging tail, happy. Cat wagging tail, not happy. Yeah. But the cat is purring. The cat is smiling at you. Because the cortex in the cat, or also the limbic system, is enjoying the affection, but the brainstem, which is connected to the tail, goes right down the spine into the tail, the brainstem is not so happy with this. So you have these 2 different behaviors happening at the same time. And in human beings, this is someone opening up the freezer, pulling out the Ben & Jerry's, and as they're sticking the spoon into it, saying, I really shouldn't be eating this. This is stupid. Why am I eating this? As they're putting the spoon into their mouth. And it's because you have these different organs, each one of them with a different desire, all happening at the same time. And that's what it means to be human. That's not a defect, it's not a weakness, it's not a lack of willpower. It's simply what it means to be human. We all do this in some degree in different areas. So, back to the reward system, this is primarily in your limbic system, or the mammalian brain. And this part of the brain is much more powerful than the cortex, which is where we do our thinking, where we do our talking, where we do our conceptualizing of our identity. This is who Tim is, this is what Tim does. That's up here in the cortex. But the part that makes us feel rewarded, or the part that desires reward in the midst of stress, different organ, very primitive, very mammalian. So the conscious part of your brain isn't calling the shots. It's not saying, okay, you need to do something rewarding now because you're under stress. The mammalian brain says, ooh, stress, we're going to do something rewarding. And it doesn't do that with language. It does that with physical urges. It does that with emotions or sensations. It'll create a feeling in you that drives you towards the freezer, that drives you towards the bag of chips or towards the beer or glass of wine. It's not a languaging that takes place. It's a movement. So it's really hard to overpower that. In fact, it's not a good idea to even try, because the cortex doesn't have as much horsepower as the horse brain does. So when it comes to dealing with this type of behavior, dealing with this type of stress eating or emotional eating, you have to realize that you are not in control. the part of you that thinks of you, you know, you are not in control.
Yeah.
And what's happening is there's more stress than your body is comfortable with in that moment. So rather than adding more stress by having the conscious part of your brain fight with the other parts of the brain, and by the way, it always loses that fight, always loses that fight, and it just adds more stress. So rather than adding stress, we have to try to reduce the stress. So number one, let the emotional brain give you the signal that it's trying to give you. Check in, communicate with it, try to get in touch with it. Like, okay, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling stressed. What in your environment is causing that? Or what in your primitive memories is causing that? What triggered you? Where is this stress coming from? Let's take a look. And I know you think the ice cream is going to be the best way to soothe us, and I get that. Ice cream is soothing. It works for a little while. But if we focus on the long term, that's not a really good long-term solution. So while we're thinking about the ice cream, let's see if we can come up with some other ways to reduce this stress and to reward ourselves. You know, can we investigate that? So rather than a punishment or being strict or no, you can't do that, it's like, okay, I get it. You're totally stressed, you're overwhelmed. Maybe you don't even know why, but let's see if we can figure out why. Let's see if we can put ourselves in a place where we're not so triggered. So we use the conscious part in that sense to be really gentle with the other parts, which are not conscious and are really primitive. They work like animals do. In that sense, we have a lot more in common with animals than we do with other human beings when we're in that state.
Yeah.
And we just have to accept that that's what it means to be human and be really loving and gentle and try to find a solution inside of that, just like you would with a kid. If you yell at a child who is primarily mammalian brain, children don't have a fully formed human brain yet. That cortex doesn't really fully develop until you're 25. And that's scary. People don't like to hear that. Kids, 18-year-olds do not like to hear that.
Yeah.
But that's just scientific fact. But young kids especially, they are primarily primitive brain, and primarily the right side is more developed over the left side. The left side is where language is primarily. The right side is where emotions are and physical sensations are. And in children, that develops first. So if you yell at the kid, they may stop the behavior, but you didn't actually help them grow or learn anything. You just scared them. And their brain is coming up with a strategy of how to deal with threat rather than why was it a bad thing to do what I did.
Sure.
Instead, it's like, okay, I'm going to change my behavior to deal with threat, but I don't know why it's a good thing to not do this. And we have to treat ourselves the same way when we're in that state, because it's really the primitive child brain that's causing us to eat that way.
Yeah.
So you just with the kids, like, okay, I get it. You're having a tantrum there. You're having a meltdown. So, let's talk about what's wrong. It looks like you're really upset. So what can we do to help you not be so upset?
Yeah.
And we do that with ourselves too. It's very effective. Long answer, I know, but that's...
The longer the better. That was really good.
You were on this particular course. You would put yourself in this particular seat in that particular office, and data came in that said, well, that's not the seat you should be sitting in. And you're like, well, then I quit. I give up. Rather than switching to a different seat. That would have fixed the problem. But no, I'm invested in this seat. I don't want to have to change seats. I don't want to have to move my chair a quarter of an inch to the right. I want my chair to be right here. It's my office. My rules.